A piercing wind howled through the narrow alleys of Bloomsbury as Inspector Charles Latimer hunched his shoulders and turned his coat collar up. The grey wash of morning was only just beginning to creep across the facades of Georgian townhouses when he reached number 47 Cumnor Street. The gas lamps were still flickering uselessly in the dawn gloom, and the fog had rolled in thick from the Thames. He was not alone. A small knot of constables stood outside the townhouse's wrought iron gate, their expressions tense, boots wet from the dew-soaked pavement. "Locked from the inside, sir," Sergeant Hanley murmured as Latimer approached. "Every window latched, every door bolted. And yet, he's gone." Latimer arched a brow. "Gone? Who exactly is missing?" "Professor Aldous Crane, retired horologist, reclusive, eccentric. Lived alone these past 7 years. This morning, his housekeeper, Mrs. Dorrit, arrived as usual only to find the front door bolted. No answer to her knocking. She got the constable on the beat to force entry through the back. House perfectly undisturbed. Except, Hanley gestured for Latimer to follow him. The rooms were immaculate. Polished mahogany, tight-bound volumes lining shelves, and clocks. Dozens of them. From grandiose long cases to intricate French mantelpieces, the house ticked with an eerie precision. In the parlor, an envelope lay on the coffee table. It bore the name, Inspector Latimer, in an angular, old-fashioned hand. Latimer picked it up, opened it, and read aloud, "Time waits for no man, but I've asked it to make an exception." "A.C." Hanley coughed. "We thought it a jest. But there's no sign of him. No struggle, no blood, yet he's not here. And there's this." He led Latimer into the professor's study. On the desk, surrounded by blueprints and tools, stood a single object, a pocket watch. But its hands were moving backwards. Steadily, counter to the expected course of time. Latimer leaned in. The ticking was faint, but there. A trick watch. "We've shown it to 2 horologists already. Neither can explain it. The mechanism is real, not tampered. Designed deliberately to go in reverse. And Professor Crane, well, he was obsessed with time. Some said, too obsessed." Latimer's eyes narrowed. "And no signs of departure. No coat missing. No signs he packed." Hanley shook his head. "Exactly as he always left it. Something wasn't right." Latimer felt it deep in his bones. A man simply does not vanish from a locked room, especially not one filled with clocks ticking backwards. He asked to see the housekeeper. Mrs. Dorrit was pale, her gloved hands twisting a kerchief. "I've worked for him since before his wife died, sir. He was always odd. Counted seconds aloud, adjusted his clocks every hour, read time travel novels like gospel. But kind. Always kind. He was afraid, though. Lately. Said someone had been tampering with the grandfather clock in the hallway. I told him he was imagining things." "Did he have visitors?" "Never. Only letters, mostly from a man in Oxford, Professor Lorimer. They were collaborators once." Latimer filed the name away. "Did you notice anything strange the last few days?" The woman hesitated. "He began sleeping in the parlor. Said he didn't trust the upstairs anymore. I didn't press him. I thought he was losing himself." Latimer requested to see the rest of the house. Every room bore the marks of order and obsession. Clock faces everywhere, schematic diagrams of escapements. Pages torn from Newton and Einstein pinned to walls. But upstairs, the strangeness increased. On the bedroom door, someone had drawn a chalk sigil. Circles within circles, strange notations. It was faint now, almost smudged. Latimer stared at it. "Who would have done this?" Hanley replied quietly. "Your guess is as good as mine. But there's something else." From the professor's wardrobe, they retrieved a journal, bound in green leather, with gold filigree. It was filled with entries, the handwriting precise and increasingly frenzied. The most recent entries read like a man slipping into paranoia. The clocks have begun to rebel. I dream of the corridor again, the one with no end. If I reverse the mechanism, perhaps I can buy enough time. Borrow it, if you will. Lorimer said the experiment must be halted. But he doesn't understand. I must escape before the moment arrives. Latimer closed the journal. This man believed something was coming for him, and that it was scheduled. They questioned the neighbors, but no one had seen or heard anything. The night had passed in silence, save the regular chimes from within Crane's home. Only one boy had noticed something, a flash of light in the upper window around 2:17 a.m. Like lightning, he said, but no thunder. Back at the station, Latimer wired Oxford for information on Professor Lorimer and requested a team to dismantle the grandfather clock. It was there, beneath the pendulum housing, that they found the second clue, a small metal plate concealed beneath a false panel, engraved with a date August 17, 1897, nearly 40 years ago, and a phrase, "Start the clock and end the line." Henley frowned. A code. Latimer's face remained unreadable. Or a prophecy. That night, unable to shake the puzzle, Latimer returned to the house alone. He sat in the parlor, the backwards, ticking pocket watch in his hand. He studied its workings by lamplight, noting the curious alignment of the escapement wheel. It was not merely reversed, it was inverted entirely. An anomaly, a deliberate design, and then the chiming began. Midnight. But instead of 12 chimes, the clocks rang 13, one after the other, in unison. The long case, the mantelpiece. Even the pocket watch clicked once more than it should have. The air in the parlor grew cold. Latimer stood, heart thudding. From the hallway, a soft creak. He drew his revolver, stepping silently toward the sound. Nothing, empty. But on the study wall, newly appeared, scrawled in ink that dripped like wet oil, were 4 words I. Ever Barrad. Time? And the pocket watch in his hand had stopped ticking, the hands frozen, at 2:17. The following morning brought no clarity, only fog and the persistent chiming of clocks that seemed increasingly unnerving. Inspector Latimer sat in the study of number 47 Cumnor Street, rubbing at his temple, the memory of the night's events pressing like a cold hand on the back of his neck. The words scrawled on the wall, I, Harvey, Boarowi, Tam, had vanished by daylight. No sign of ink, no smudge, no trace. Only the faint scent of oil and brass lingered. The pocket watch, still in his coat pocket, now ticked normally. At 9:30, a crisp knock at the front door broke the quiet. The constable posted outside opened it to reveal a woman in her late 30s, tall, with sharp grey eyes that seemed to take in the world in one swift glance. She wore a dove, grey coat, gloves, and a felt hat pinned tightly to hair that had been pulled back with the precision of habit. Latimer rose from his chair. "Miss James," he said, surprised. "I wasn't told the Yard had sent for you." "They didn't," said Helena James coolly, stepping inside and surveying the room without hesitation. "But your wire reached Oxford, and I've been keeping correspondence with Professor Lorimer. He was rather alarmed. So I came." "On whose authority?" "My own. Lorimer and Crane were my mentors once, briefly. And this, well, it doesn't feel like a mere disappearance, does it?" Latimer studied her. He'd heard of Helena James, formerly of the Oxford Mathematical Society, now a private consultant for certain unusual cases that the Yard struggled with. Some dismissed her as eccentric. Others called her brilliant. Latimer had yet to decide which. Helena moved through the study with ease, noting the scattered blueprints and the wall of timepieces. She paused before the desk, brushing a finger across the edge of the professor's journal. I see the clocks haven't stopped, she murmured. Strange, don't you think? If he meant to vanish, you'd expect a degree of disorder. Chaos. But here, everything is precision. Latimer watched her as she paced. She opened the pocket watch, raising it to her ear, then turned it over and examined the back. You noticed the watch ticks in reverse, I assume? Only at night. During the day, it ticks forward. Helena arched an eyebrow. Oh, how clever. A split mechanism, linked to temperature. Perhaps, or light exposure. This man was working at the edge of horology and madness. She turned to the fireplace mantel, where a small porcelain dog stood beside an old carriage clock. Her fingers hovered over the dog for a moment, before picking it up. This isn't from this house. Latimer frowned. What do you mean? Helena pointed to a fine layer of dust on the mantel. See the line. This dog's outline doesn't match the dust pattern around it. It was placed there recently. And, she turned it over. No maker's mark. Just a number. 3. Latimer took it from her, examining the base. Sure enough, etched faintly, as if scratched by a fine pin in 3. We found no reference to it in his belongings, Latimer said slowly. Helena's eyes narrowed. Then it wasn't his. Someone brought it here. She replaced the dog and turned to the tall bookshelf behind the desk. Her gaze moved rapidly across the spines, pausing near the bottom. Your constables catalogued these. Briefly, she knelt, running a hand across the shelf's underside before removing a book entirely. Chronometry, an essay on time perception. From between its pages fell a folded piece of vellum. Helena opened it. Symbols, drawn with the same strange ink as the sigil on the upstairs door. Latimer leaned closer. More of those patterns, circles within circles. But what do they mean? Helena didn't answer at first. Instead, she took the drawing to the window, letting the morning light hit it at an angle. These aren't just symbols. They're coordinates. Or something like them. Look closely, see the inner rings. Notations along the edge, they're timestamps, paired numbers, likely referencing precise moments. Moments of what? Change. Latimer gave her a long look. Are you suggesting Crane built something that could manipulate time? No, Helena said simply. But I'm suggesting he believed he could. There's a difference. But even belief under the right conditions can be dangerous. They were interrupted by a sharp knock. Hanley entered, pale and grim. Sir. Telegram just arrived from Oxford. Professor Lorimer's dead. Struck by a tram outside his college this morning. Witnesses say he stepped into the street as if in a trance. Latimer felt a chill settle in. Coincidence? No, Helena said. It's escalation. Crane feared something was coming. Now his closest associate is dead less than 24 hours after he vanished. She moved to the journal again, flipping through the last few entries. If I reverse the mechanism, perhaps I can buy enough time. She read it aloud, tapping the final line with a gloved finger. Lorimer said the experiment must be halted. But he doesn't understand. Her voice dropped. Lorimer tried to stop him. And paid for it. Then what's the experiment? Latimer asked. Helena turned to the blueprint pinned above the desk. It's not an experiment in time travel, if that's what you're thinking. That's child's play. Crane was trying to map time, to isolate it as a physical dimension, and then to interfere. She pointed to a device sketched in careful ink. Circular chambers, mirrors, calibrated lenses. A time mirror. At least, that's what the fringe theorists call it. A way to reflect the present moment back upon itself. Latimer stepped closer. He built this. If he did, it's not here. They spent the next hour combing the house more methodically. Helena examined walls for signs of false panels, lifted carpets for hidden trapdoors. In the cellar, they found a strange wiring pattern running along the beams, converging near the old coal chute, but the space was empty. Helena crouched, picking up a sliver of glass from the floor, no larger than a thumbnail. It shimmered faintly. "From the corridor window?" Latimer asked. "No," she said, voice flat. "This is specialized, refractive glass, used in telescopes or mirrors." She nodded. Back in the parlor, Helena picked up the porcelain dog once more and turned it over. 3. "There are more," she said. "At least 2 others. We find them, we find who's been here, who brought what, and maybe what they took with them." As Latimer watched her pace the room, her eyes scanning for another thread to tug, he began to feel the weight of the case shift. It was no longer simply a disappearance. It was a warning. The porcelain dog remained on the table between them, its presence almost accusatory. Helena James stared at it as if willing it to speak, while Inspector Latimer jotted down names and possibilities in his notebook. The number etched beneath it, 3, was not just a marker, but a silent message. And if there was a 3, then surely there had been a 1 and 2. Someone had placed these pieces, perhaps as a game or a trail. The investigation was no longer about where Aldous Crane had gone. It was now about who had helped him vanish. Latimer ordered Sergeant Hanley to pull in anyone who had contact with Crane in the days before his disappearance. By early afternoon, the drawing room had been repurposed as an interview space, its many ticking clocks now serving as a relentless metronome for what followed. First came Mrs. Dorrit, the housekeeper, brought back at Helena's request. Her manner remained respectful but brittle, her gaze flicking often to Helena with something close to suspicion. "You said Professor Crane began sleeping downstairs," Helena prompted. "Yes," Mrs. Dorrit nodded. "Said the ticking upstairs was too loud." "But wouldn't it have been just as loud here?" "He said it wasn't the clocks making noise," she said after a pause. "He said it was the space between them." Helena cocked her head. "And that made sense to you?" Mrs. Dorrit's lips tightened. "I don't pretend to understand his talk. But I do know this: something frightened him. Properly frightened. He locked the study every night with a chain from the inside. One morning, I found a burn mark on the floor near the fireplace, like a ring of soot. He said it was an accident. But there was no ash. Just the mark." "Why didn't you tell the police that yesterday?" Latimer asked sharply. "I thought it'd make him look mad," she whispered. And maybe he was. But I still respected him. Helena rose and paced the room once, thoughtful. "Did he ever mention names? Anyone he didn't trust?" Mrs. Dorrit nodded. "A man visited once, months ago. Said his name was Mr. Thorne. Crane was furious afterwards. Locked himself in for 3 days. Helena and Latimer exchanged a glance. "Did you see him?" Latimer asked. "Only his back. Wore a pale coat, thin, tall. The sort that blends in." Next was a neighbor, Mr. Bernard Kitteridge, a retired solicitor who lived across the street. Thin spectacles, neat tie, and a clipped manner that made him sound perpetually impatient. "He never caused a stir," Kitteridge said, tapping his cane once against the floor. "Odd, yes. Always winding clocks, even outside. Once saw him adjusting his watch by the church bell as though the world might collapse if he didn't." "Did you notice anyone visiting him?" "No regular callers. Though there was a van, green, parked nearby for nearly an hour 2 nights before he vanished. No logo. 2 men inside. I thought it odd." "Time?" Helena asked. "Just past 1 in the morning." Helena's eyes narrowed. "And you didn't report it?" "I thought they were builders. Who else parks on a dark street and does nothing for an hour. Back at the house, Latimer asked Hanley to check traffic records and security patrol logs for that van. Helena remained quiet, pacing between the clocks. The pattern was forming, but still incomplete. Their next visitor was Professor Crane's former student, Miss Eliza Hargrove. Tall, with auburn hair and an impeccable Oxford accent. Her composure was studied, almost too perfect. She had arrived without being summoned, claiming she had heard the news from a colleague. I knew him well, she began, sitting with a stillness that suggested rehearsal. He mentored me during my final year. I even worked on some of his early theories. Temporal resonance, he called it. Did he confide in you recently? Helena asked. Eliza's eyes flicked briefly. No. I'd not seen him in months. Odd, said Helena. He referenced a female assistant in his journal. Someone who helped transcribe the Lorimer letters. A pause. Barely half a second, but there. I used to help with those, Eliza admitted. But only in the past. Which is why your fingerprints were on his study doorknob, Helena said. Evenly. Eliza blinked. I visited once, 2 weeks ago. I forgot to mention it earlier. Latimer leaned forward. Why the omission? I didn't want to be drawn into this circus, and besides, he was agitated. Spoke in riddles. I stayed only 20 minutes. Helena studied her. Did he show you the porcelain dog? The what? Helena walked to the mantel and picked it up. This. Numbered. There may be others. Eliza stared at it too long. No, she said finally. I've never seen it. Helena's voice was quiet. You hesitated. Why? Eliza's lips parted as if to speak, but then she stood. I don't see how this is relevant. It's relevant because you're lying, Helena said softly. And you're too practiced at it to be doing so out of nervousness. I came here out of concern. No, Helena said. You came to see what we had. You knew about the dog. Because you've seen at least one other like it. For a moment, Eliza looked ready to deny it again, but then she met Helena's gaze and said nothing. After she left, Helena turned to Latimer. She's hiding something. Possibly more than one thing. But she's not working alone. You think she's part of whatever this is. She knows what happened to him. Or at least part of it. And the van. It wasn't random. This was planned. As dusk settled again over Cumnor Street, Helena stood in the hallway outside Crane's study, staring at the wall. There are layers here, she murmured. Someone helped Crane vanish. Maybe for his own reasons. Maybe not. And someone else is trying to erase the traces. Latimer gestured at the clocks. Then what do you make of all this? These endless mechanisms. They're part of his safeguard. I don't think he intended to disappear. I think he intended to be found, at the right moment. And the porcelain dogs. Helena looked down at the mantel again. Breadcrumbs, she said. Left by someone who doesn't want the path too easy to follow. But just visible enough. Because the game isn't over. It's beginning. The night deepened around number 47 Cumnor Street, the house steeped in shadow save for the soft glint of brass from the ticking clocks. Helena James sat in the dim study, the porcelain dog still on the desk beside her, the number beneath it catching the lamp's glow like a secret waiting to be spoken aloud. Across from her, Latimer stood at the blackboard they'd erected against the far wall, pinning names and dates with a growing unease. Eliza Hargrove, he muttered, tapping her name. Says she hadn't seen Crane in months, but her fingerprints are all over the place. And the way she recoiled from the dog. It wasn't confusion, it was recognition. She's lying. Helena agreed. But not about everything. She truly cared for Crane. That much I believe. Latimer looked over his shoulder. You think jealousy? Possibly, Helena said, or betrayal. She's the only one of the three with academic ambition. If Crane's work was about to be published or patented, Latimer cut in. This blueprint you found, if real, it could revolutionize how we measure time. Control it even, or distort it, Helena said softly. Frayne wasn't just theorizing, he was doing. That kind of leap attracts attention, and enemies. Latimer jotted something down. So we've got Eliza with motive to protect or control Crane's discovery. Mrs. Durrett, the housekeeper, loyal but afraid. Kitteridge, the neighbor, who noticed a strange van but only reported it after we asked. And then this elusive Minster. Thorne, that name again. Helena closed the journal she'd been poring over. Thorne may not be a name, it could be a code. Crane wrote it with an uppercase T, and the word Thorne appears in his notes several times, underlined. One entry mentions the thorn in the hour. A metaphor. Or a mechanism, she said, standing. Something inserted to interrupt the flow. A thorn in the gear, slowing time. If Thorne is a person, he's the one sabotaging everything. Latimer considered that. Then let's say Eliza wants Crane's discovery. Thorne wants to suppress it. And Mrs. Dorrit, caught between loyalty and fear. And Kitteridge? Helena asked. That's the trouble. He doesn't fit, unless he's the red herring. Helena paced. Not necessarily. He noticed the van. He described its color and timing precisely. Most people wouldn't. Unless they meant for us to know. Latimer looked up. So he's planting information, or guiding us toward a version of events. If the van was part of the plan, he might be feeding us half-truths. Latimer rubbed his chin. Which makes the van central. Someone needed equipment. The time mirror, the divisor, must have been removed before we arrived. Helena nodded. That's what the van was for. And whoever drove it either took Crane with them, or helped him vanish. Just then, Hanley entered, out of breath. Inspector, we tracked the van. Latimer straightened. Go on. It was reported by a local postman who recognized it from a back alley near Somerton Street. Parked outside a former print shop. Long abandoned?
Show me,
Latimer said. No, Helena interrupted. Let me go. You'll draw attention. I need to see that space before it's been cleaned up. Latimer hesitated, then nodded. Hanley goes with you. No heroics. 20 minutes later. Helena stood before the old print shop. The building sagged under its own weight, brickwork buckled with damp. The alley behind it reeked of oil and rust. But inside, it was something else entirely. The ground floor was cluttered with crates, coils of copper wire, shattered lenses, and two porcelain dogs, identical to the one from Crane's house. One had a one under it. The other two, Helena crouched examining them, placed deliberately. The pieces were being arranged, one by one. Hanley gestured to a tarp in the corner. Beneath it, a wheeled crate, heavy. Inside, a circular frame of polished steel, nearly 4 feet wide, cracked along one edge. Fragments of mirrored glass clung to its inner ring. This, Helena whispered, was the time mirror. She stood and paced. It was removed recently. Look at the dust pattern, the drag marks. Crane must have built it here in secret. Hidden from his own housekeeper. From everyone. But not from Eliza, Hanley said. She was here. I found this. He handed her a strip of paper, part of a letter torn. Cannot delay further. The mechanism is unstable. Lorimer threatened to alert the authorities. Meet me at the fallback location. If Thorne suspects, all is lost. It was signed with a single letter E. Helena folded it gently. Eliza. So she was part of it. Back at Cumnor Street, Helena spread the letter before Latimer. alongside the numbered dogs and a copied sketch of the device. "Here's the shape of it," she said. "Crane built something real. Lorimer tried to stop him. Eliza tried to control it. Thorne, whoever he is, tried to destroy it. And now Crane is missing, Lorimer is dead, and Eliza is folding under pressure." "Why hide the letter?" Latimer asked. "Because it shows she wasn't just a bystander. She was involved, and possibly betrayed." Latimer moved toward the chalkboard. "So what are the motives?" "Greed," Helena said first. Eliza wanted credit. She saw Crane's obsession as her path to prestige. "Fear," Latimer added. Lorimer feared what Crane had made. Tried to stop it. "Jealousy," she continued. Mrs. Dorrit resented Eliza's access to Crane, and possibly feared being replaced. "Revenge," Latimer said darkly. If Thorne lost something to Crane, an idea, a reputation, he might have engineered all of this to discredit or erase him. Helena nodded. And through it all, Crane tried to stay ahead. The numbered dogs, the messages, the reverse, ticking watch, he left signs. Not to be followed blindly, but to test who would understand. "And you think someone is following?" Latimer asked. "I think someone is watching. Testing how far we'll go." Latimer exhaled. "We need to find the fallback location." Helena looked again at the letter. "It's Eliza's phrase. That means she knows it. Then she'll lead us there," Latimer said. Helena nodded, a sharp glint in her eyes. "Let her think we're finished asking questions. She'll panic. And panic reveals everything." The morning light fell grey and flat over Cumnor Street as Helena James returned to the drawing room, where Latimer and Hanley stood over a desk scattered with evidence. The air had shifted since last night. Something too neat, too swift, had begun to settle over the case. Helena sensed it in the silence between words, in the tidy sequence of events that had suddenly started to line up a little too well. "There's been a development," Latimer said, gesturing to a sealed envelope and a pair of white gloves on the table. Helena approached, lifting the envelope carefully. The wax seal bore Crane's monogram, and inside was a brief handwritten note, recognizably his script. "If this reaches you, something has gone wrong. The mechanism was not ready. I could not risk Eliza, nor Thorne, getting access before the test. The fallback location is compromised. Destroy the plans. Do not follow me. A.C." Latimer folded his arms. "It was delivered this morning to the front door. No return address. But it matches his handwriting. Forensics confirmed it. Too clean," Helena said instantly. "Meaning, if Crane meant to vanish and cut contact, why send a letter? Why sign his name? And why now, just after we questioned Eliza and found the fallback site?" Hanley interjected. "Sir, we also found this behind Eliza Hargrove's bookcase." He placed a brass key and a scrap of blueprint on the desk. "Matches the device fragments. It puts her at the scene." Latimer looked grim. "She's confessed to knowing about the mechanism. Said she helped transcribe and assemble the components. But Crane turned paranoid. Accused her of betrayal. She claims she only wanted to safeguard his work." "Convenient," Helena muttered. "And the timing?" "She came in this morning," Latimer replied. "Said she couldn't sleep. Brought the key voluntarily. She said it was time we knew everything." Helena leaned on the desk, studying the blueprint. "This portion," she said, pointing to a faint circle etched with clock hands, "was missing from Crane's journals. Only someone with first-hand knowledge could replicate it. She wasn't protecting the device, she was replicating it." Latimer raised an eyebrow. "Then she's the architect." "No," Helena said. "She's the decoy. Someone wants us to stop digging. To think Crane walked away. Eliza's confession comes too easily. It's designed to close the case. Latimer hesitated, then said, "We still have motive, means, and now, partial confession." The department's ready to issue a statement. They believe Crane either disappeared voluntarily or was aided by Eliza to flee before the invention went public. Helena turned slowly to face him. "Then someone has won. Just not us," he frowned. "Explain." She paced once. Every clue, down to the porcelain dogs, suggested complexity, layers of meaning. Crane didn't fear Eliza. He feared what was beyond her. Something or someone manipulating events. And now, as if by magic, the evidence ties everything neatly to her, with a letter we can't trace, and a confession designed to appear reluctant. Latimer rubbed the back of his neck. "You think we're being played?" "I know it," she said. Crane's phrasing in the letter. It's too formal, too unlike him. The note lacks a certain rhythm. He wrote with obsessive cadence, remember. This lacks that. And the fallback location wasn't compromised. It was abandoned. Eliza didn't flee it. She planted evidence there. And now she wants us to believe it's over. Latimer didn't reply for a long moment. Then, "Hanley, hold the public statement. Tell them we're still verifying. And keep eyes on Eliza." As Hanley left, Helena turned back to the study. The clocks had begun their rhythmic ticking again, unbothered by the deceit surrounding them. She stared at the third porcelain dog, still resting on the mantel. "If 3 dogs exist," she said, "then there's at least a 4th. The sequence isn't complete. And I think Crane intended each to be found only once we understood their placement." She walked to the desk and flipped through Crane's annotated calendar. He marked dates obsessively. "But see this?" She pointed to an entry from 6 months ago. A strange symbol, like a double spiral, etched beside the name Thorne. He never used symbols for meetings. Only for events. Latimer leaned in. "What sort of event?" "That's what I'm trying to determine. But here's the thing. This symbol appears again 2 months later, and again last week. Same spiral, increasing in frequency." Latimer's expression tightened. "You think it's counting down?" "I think Crane believed time itself, at least as he understood it, was running out." Before Latimer could answer, Henley returned, his face pale. "Sir, Eliza Hargrove has vanished." "What do you mean vanished?" "She left her flat an hour ago. Gave the constable a note, said she was taking flowers to Crane's grave." "Which is nonsense. There is no grave." "Then she vanished off High Street." Helena's voice was cold. "Of course she did. The confession was her shield. A distraction. Then where is she going?" Latimer asked. "She's going to finish what she started," Helena said. "Or destroy it." Latimer moved to the door. "Will of patrols search?" "No," Helena interrupted. "That's what she expects. She's not fleeing. She's retrieving. There's something we haven't found. The last dog. The final clue." She turned back to the desk. Frane's device. His entries mentioned resonance markers hidden across the city. Objects tuned to trigger a signal. What if the dogs weren't just symbols? What if they're keys? Latimer's face hardened. "Then Eliza has one, we have another. And she's looking for the final piece." "And she's not alone?" Helena said. "Because Thorne is still out there. And he doesn't want to retrieve the device. He wants to erase it entirely." As the rain began to fall outside, softly against the glass, Helena turned to the door. "We thought this was over," she murmured. "But the real criminal is just getting started." The air inside the abandoned workshop on Fleet Lane was heavy with rust and damp. The smell of oxidized metal hanging like a memory too stubborn to fade. Helena stepped cautiously over broken glass. her torch slicing through shadows where sunlight failed. The place had been dormant for years. No recent entries on the city's property records. No utilities connected since 1911. And yet the third porcelain dog, discovered hidden beneath a dislodged floorboard in Crane's townhouse, bore an address scrawled faintly beneath its base. This address. Latimer's voice echoed faintly from behind. What are we hoping to find here? Exactly. Not hoping, Helena murmured, brushing aside a dust-laden tarpaulin. Remember the calendar, the spiral symbol next to Thorne's name. I've seen it before. A file I once handled during my early days at the Yard. It was part of a case we thought buried long ago. And this? She gestured around the forgotten room. This was one of the sites involved. She knelt beside a workbench, its surface still imprinted with faded blue chalk lines, and tapped a rusted tin drawer. It slid open with a groan. Inside lay a set of tiny brass mechanisms, half assembled, and a thick leather-bound notebook. She flipped it open, and both their eyes fixed on the cover page. Horatio Thorne, apprentice C.R. Paterson 1898. Latimer gave a low whistle. That's impossible. Paterson died in 1901. But Thorne didn't, Helena said grimly. He simply changed his name. The pages revealed a meticulous record of horological experiments, many oddly familiar. Devices that blurred the boundary between measurement and manipulation. Timepieces that synchronized over distance. Pendulums designed to run backward under specific conditions. Blueprints for modular devices meant to mimic natural rhythms. Crane's theories hadn't been original. They'd been inherited. Helena's finger traced a diagram titled Phase Delay Induction. Crane's mechanism. This is its ancestor. Thorne didn't just fund Crane, he fed him ideas, old, dangerous ideas. She turned another page, dated 1900. It included an address scribbled hastily in the margin, St. Aldwyn's Asylum, test unsuccessful. 2 dead. Latimer's voice was tight. Why weren't we told about any of this? Because the original investigation was closed as a mechanical malfunction, Helena said. Back then, few understood what they were dealing with. But Thorne didn't stop. He went underground. Changed names. Waited. She stood, holding the book under one arm. This case didn't start with Crane. It started over 2 decades ago, when Thorne was a failed apprentice chasing illusions. Somewhere along the way, he found someone to carry the work forward. Crane. Or rather, Crane found him. The question is, was it inspiration or blackmail? Latimer opened a second drawer and retrieved a bundle of photographs. Sepia, toned and faded. They showed a younger Crane, clean, shaven and earnest, standing beside a tall man with hawkish eyes. The man wore a heavy coat and always kept one hand hidden from the camera's view. Is that Thorne? Latimer asked. More likely Thorne under his previous name, Helena replied. C.R. Paterson had no surviving students, no official apprentices. Yet this man keeps appearing in documents that should never intersect. Latimer ran a hand over his jaw. Then they've both been lying. Eliza. 2. Helena turned toward the window. Outside, the rain had slowed to a mist, the clouds breaking apart like forgotten riddles. She remembered Eliza's words during their interview. I never asked questions he wouldn't answer. She had meant Crane. But what if the real silence had come from somewhere deeper? Helena reached for her pocketbook and flipped back through her notes. There. Eliza's family name long overlooked. Hargrove. Not an uncommon name, but one that rang a bell now in light of the old asylum file. She pulled the slip from the file Hanley had retrieved earlier and scanned the names listed under the 1900 St. Aldwyn's incident. Patient next of kin M. Hargrove. Eliza's mother, she whispered, or aunt, a relative at least. She has a direct tie to the victims of Thorne's early experiments. Latimer's face turned grim. You think she's doing this for revenge? No, Helena said softly. I think she's doing it to finish what they started. Perhaps she believed Crane's guilt would correct the past. Or perhaps she believed the machine could undo what Thorne's experiments had taken from her family. Either way, she's not working alone, and she's not the only one who thinks time can be borrowed. She turned and strode quickly toward the exit. One need to return to Crane's townhouse. There's something about the dogs. Each one placed deliberately. Each one pointing backward rather than forward. As they left the workshop, Latimer caught up beside her. Backward. Not clocks, Latimer. Markers. Each one from a moment in Crane's life when something was taken from him. One in the lab where his funding was cut. One in the room where his mother died. And one, placed in that workshop where he first met Thorne. You think he left them as what? Warnings? No, Helena said as they reached the car. He left them as reminders. That time can't be controlled, only witnessed. She paused, the implication dawning. Unless Eliza believed otherwise. As they drove back through the narrowing streets, a single thought circled Helena's mind. The mechanism had never been about measurement. It had always been about undoing. Memory disguised as progress. Regret disguised as invention. And somewhere, in the corners of a past no one dared revisit, lay the true motive. Not wealth, not revenge. But the desire to rewrite time itself. And someone, Eliza or Thorne, perhaps both, was ready to tear the present apart trying to reach it. By the time Helena reached Crane's townhouse again, the evening had begun to settle with an amber light that slid over the rooftops like a veil of silence. She moved quickly through the corridor, Latimer on her heels, the weight of the brass dogs wrapped in her satchel. The house smelled faintly of lavender and scorched copper. The lingering ghost of mechanical obsession. Helena placed all 3 dogs on the kitchen table and studied them. Each faced a different direction. One forward, one left, one back. But the third, the one from the workshop, had no directional stance. Instead, its snout was turned down, as if sniffing something lost beneath it. Latimer leaned in. They still seem like ornaments to me. They aren't. Look, see this mark under the base of the third one. It's not just an address. It's a compass bearing. She aligned the 3 dogs, twisting them with care until their bases pointed along the bearing noted. East, northeast, precisely. And then, just as the last one clicked into position, the drawer beside them opened by itself. Latimer flinched. That wasn't the wind, was it? Inside the drawer lay an envelope, thick with old parchment and sealed with wax imprinted with the same spiral symbol. Helena broke it open. Inside was a folded page torn from a journal, Crane's handwriting unmistakable. They believe the machine failed. It didn't. It worked too well. I saw her. Not a ghost, not a dream. I saw her, just as she was. The price of that vision was time itself. Helena looked up, her mind snapping through gears of deduction. He's not talking about the future. He's talking about the past. Crane saw someone lost. His mother. Latimer asked. No. Someone else. Someone connected to both him and Eliza, a shared grief. This machine, these tokens, he was building a map backwards through time. She reached for the parchment again and saw, scrawled faintly in the margin, EH must never finish it. She believes she can reverse the cost. But the machine only takes, it never gives. EH. Latimer muttered. Eliza Hargrove. Helena nodded grimly. He tried to stop her before the machine could be completed. The murder was desperation. His or hers? I don't know. But this tells me Crane was afraid of what the machine truly did. And he wasn't alone in building it. Helena stepped back, deep in thought. There was a knot in the evidence, one that needed untying not with facts, but with something deeper. A lie untangled not by logic, but by instinct. She paced the hallway until her eye caught the painting again. The seaside scene with a girl holding a balloon. She had dismissed it before as sentimental. But now something about it struck her as deliberate. Eliza said Crane hated sentimentality, she murmured. Latimer nodded. Said he never kept pictures or mementos. Then why this? She pointed to the balloon. Its string was taut, unnaturally so, pointing in a straight line, again, northeast. She stepped behind the painting and found the edge of a concealed safe. Latimer let out a low whistle. You think she knew about this? I think she left it here for someone to find, or to test if someone could. Helena knelt and used the bearing from the brass dogs as the combination. The safe clicked open. Inside lay a photograph. A young girl, Eliza unmistakably, stood between two men. One was Crane. The other was the same man from the workshop photos, Thorne, younger, thinner, but unmistakably the same piercing eyes. On the back of the photo was written, "Our daughter, our legacy." The circle must close. Helena closed the safe slowly. She's not just connected to Thorne. She's his daughter. Latimer blinked. And Crane? Godfather, perhaps, maybe more. But she's inherited more than grief. She's inherited obsession. Helena sat on the stairwell, her eyes narrowing with thought. We need to draw her out. She's too careful to confront. Too smart for a direct question. What do you have in mind? Helena pulled a silver pocket watch from her coat. This belonged to Crane. It was stopped at precisely 317 when we found it. I want you to leak that we've restarted it, that it began ticking again during evidence processing. Say the mechanism inside hummed faintly, as though reactivating. You want to bait her. I want to unsettle her. If she thinks the machine somehow responded posthumously to Crane's death, if she believes it activated despite her efforts, it might push her into action. Or panic. That evening, Latimer made the call to a well-placed journalist at the Tribune, feeding the story as a quiet leak. Within hours, the story appeared in a small corner of the paper's second page. Just enough to stir interest among those watching. The next day, Eliza Hargrove arrived at Scotland Yard unannounced. She looked drawn, her poise just a fraction off, as if her internal balance had shifted overnight. She asked to see Helena under the pretense of clarifying matters regarding her late employer's estate. Helena greeted her coolly, inviting her into a quiet interview room. You've seen the paper, Helena said softly. Eliza gave a flickering smile. So the mechanism still works. Even in death, my father would have been pleased. Helena didn't blink. Your father or Crane. There was a beat. Just one. But Eliza's eyes flicked sideways, her smile faltering for half a second, just long enough. You knew? Helena pressed. Not just about the machine, but about its history. About what Thorne began. You came back into Crane's life, not as a grieving assistant, but as a continuation of your father's legacy. Eliza's face hardened. You don't know what you're meddling with. I know this Crane tried to stop it. That's why he left the clues. That's why he tried to break the circle. Because he understood something your father never did. That time, once tampered with, doesn't bend, it shatters. Eliza rose, her voice trembling. You've seen nothing. You think this is about vengeance or memory, but it's about precision. About correction. My mother's death wasn't an accident, it was the result of imbalance. A moment misaligned. I can fix that. No, Helena said gently. You can't. And then Eliza did something unexpected. She wept. Not out of fear or guilt, but out of furious frustration. The breakdown wasn't loud, but it was telling. A subtle crack had opened, not in her alibi but in her belief. The very thing sustaining her deception. Helena let her cry. It was the unraveling they needed. Not proof in ink or fingerprints, but in psychology, in faith misplaced. When Eliza was finally escorted out, Helena turned to Latimer. She'll make her move soon. She still believes there's time to fix everything. But the truth is, she's run out of it. Latimer finished quietly, and somewhere, beneath all the deception, the clock ticked on. It was only the next morning when Helena first sensed something amiss. The brass dogs, those strange, silent sentinels that had guided her deeper into the truth, were no longer in her evidence box. Not reassigned, not relocated. Simply gone. She stood frozen in the yard's archive room, staring at the shelf where they'd been placed under lock and barcode. The manifest listed them as received, logged, and secured. No sign of a transfer, no notation of approval, no request for removal. They had vanished like smoke. Latimer appeared behind her, holding 2 cups of coffee. You look like someone just stole your heartbeat. They did something worse, she said softly. They stole the dogs. He blinked, stepping closer. What? No, they were just there last night. They're not now. And the chain of custody is clean, too clean. Someone wiped it before we even noticed. Latimer frowned, then immediately walked over to the secured case log and typed in the date of the initial intake. The page blinked error. Missing file. Helena didn't speak as he tried again, this time using the universal override. Gone, he muttered. Helena turned on her heel. Get me surveillance footage from the evidence vault, yesterday evening through midnight. Someone didn't just take them. They wanted them erased. An hour later, they sat in the viewing room, scanning through grainy footage. Most of it showed nothing but locked cabinets, flickering fluorescents, and the quiet churn of an air purifier. Until 2:11 a.m., when the camera feed fuzzed for precisely 7 seconds. When the screen cleared, the shelf with the dogs was empty. 7 seconds, Latimer said grimly. That's all it took. Helena narrowed her eyes. They knew exactly where to look, and what to disable. That's not just careful, that's intimate. She stood. Check every access card entry from 2:00 to 20:15 a.m. if none are logged. Then we're dealing with someone inside the system. As Latimer began pulling reports, Helena moved to the analysis lab. She needed confirmation, needed to know if anything else had been tampered with. The safe contents from Crane's townhouse. The photograph. The journal page was supposed to be in digital scan queues. But when she opened the archive file, only one image loaded the back of the photo. The front had been corrupted. Not corrupted, she murmured. Deliberately overwritten. Someone was excising the truth, piece by piece. Back in the main office, Latimer returned, his expression grave. No card entries. But you're right. It's inside. I found a forced override logged under your credentials. Helena froze. Mine. Timer stamped 2:09 a.m. Just before the cameras fuzzed. She didn't respond for a moment, only stared at the screen. They're trying to frame you? Latimer said flatly. They're trying to make it look like I'm manipulating the case. She exhaled. And if I go to our superiors now, we'll look compromised. That's the play. She leaned against the desk, letting her thoughts spiral backward, into the knot she hadn't yet unraveled. Eliza had cracked under pressure, yes, but she wasn't sloppy. She had left things behind, yes, but not without purpose. The leak about the pocket watch had stirred her, but now someone else was sweeping up the consequences. Helena's gaze sharpened. Who else benefits if the case is derailed? Latimer opened his notebook. We've already looked into Eliza. Her motivations stem from grief, obsession, maybe guilt. But someone else had access to Crane. Someone who wasn't on the radar Thorne. For instance, he disappeared 2 years ago. Which is too neat. Too tidy. She pushed off from the desk. Get me all the internal yard files on the Thorne investigation. I want to know who closed the case, who signed the final report, and whether that person still works here. Latimer paused. You think someone buried the Thorne connection on purpose? I think this case was never just about Crane's murder. It was about a machine. About legacy, and now someone is making sure the past stays buried. It took the rest of the afternoon to find what they were looking for. The Thorne file had been signed off by a Chief Inspector Giles Mercer, a name Helena hadn't seen in over a year. Supposedly retired. But retirement paperwork was missing. His address was still active, however, listed in a secure database with no forwarding contact. Helena didn't wait for protocol. That evening, she and Latimer drove north of the city, into a quiet row of converted townhomes, where Mercer's flat stood dark. No cars outside, no signs of movement. But the door had been recently oiled. The lock didn't creak. Inside, it smelled of dust, parchment, and something sharper, oil and iron. Helena's torch beam swept across the flat blueprints on the walls. Machines half built and half burned, and in the center of the room, resting beneath a tarp, was the original version of Crane's machine, bulkier, unfinished, and marked with Thorne's initials etched into brass. God, Latimer whispered. He didn't retire, he vanished. No, Helena said. He hid. From the yard, from the world, but not from this. She approached the workbench, brushing aside scattered pages. One was addressed to Eliza. If you're reading this, it means you failed to control it. I warned you, he warned you. But you were too consumed. You always were. The machine was never a bridge, it was a loop, and now, the loop is closing. Latimer picked up an object on the desk. A melted brass fragment shaped like one of the dogs. Its base had been gouged, as though someone tried to destroy its markings. They tried to eliminate all the pieces. Helena said softly. But something stopped them. Maybe guilt. Maybe fear. A sudden noise from upstairs, a floorboard creaking, froze them both. Helena raised a hand, signaling silence. Another step, deliberate, slow. She drew her weapon and moved silently up the staircase. Latimer followed, breath held tight. The upper floor was empty. But the back window was open. The cold night breeze drifting in. Whoever had been there was gone. But the message was clear. Someone wasn't just cleaning up, they were warning her. Helena turned to Latimer. We're not just chasing the truth anymore, she said. We're racing it. And as they stepped back into the night, the last thing they heard was the soft, unmistakable tick of a machine winding itself without a key. The morning light was pale and slow to climb over the rooftops of London when Helena returned to Scotland Yard. Her mind spiraling with Mercer's hidden machine, the vanishing evidence, and the knowledge that someone intelligent, intimate with their work, was orchestrating each move. Latimer followed her in silence, carrying the melted brass fragment wrapped in cloth. It would be catalogued, scanned, and locked in a secure evidence chamber under her direct command. This time, there would be no gaps in the log, no missing footage. She would ensure it personally. But as they passed through the lobby, Helena caught a strange buzz in the air. Staff whispering in corners. Uniforms rushing toward the east wing. She halted at the sight of DCI Madeline Croft approaching, face pale and jaw clenched. You'd better come with me, Croft said. It's Eliza Crane. A cold stone dropped in Helena's chest. What about her? She's gone. Helena didn't speak as she followed Croft through the hallway, Latimer close behind. They arrived at the temporary holding suite where Eliza had been placed under protective watch. Two constables stood stiffly outside, one with his head bowed. Clearly shaken, the door was open. Inside, the room was neat, disturbingly so. Eliza's bed was untouched, the small table beside it arranged with a book, a glass of water, and a folded page. No sign of struggle, no broken window, but she was gone. She wasn't transferred. Helena asked. Croft shook her head. No movement. No authorization. She vanished sometime between 3 and 5 a.m. Guard rotations confirm nothing unusual. Her last recorded sighting was at 2:57. Then nothing. Helena stepped into the room, scanning the space for something out of place. A faint chemical scent lingered, sweet, metallic. She moved to the folded page, careful not to smudge it. It was a handwritten note. I'm sorry, but some doors must remain shut. You were never meant to see the whole machine. Below the message, a sketch. Hurried, imprecise, of the same spiral pattern etched on the melted brass dog. She didn't run. Helena said quietly. She was taken, or lured. Latimer scanned the edges of the room. There's no camera in here. Non-active, Croft replied grimly. Budget cuts. Privacy concerns, no, Helena muttered. Someone planned this, knew the window of rotation, knew how long she'd be alone, and left this message to mislead us. They returned to the observation floor, where Latimer pulled up surveillance from the hallway. At 3:12 a.m., a shadow passed the camera, tall, confident, obscured by a trench coat and hat. The face was never visible, but as the figure moved past, the timestamp glitched, just as it had in the evidence vault. They've used the same jamming signal, Latimer said. This person has access to yard tech, possibly even wrote the override themselves. Helena stood still, piecing the fragments. Thorne's disappearance, Mercer's retreat, Eliza's sudden vanishing. It was all part of a loop. Someone was cleaning up every person connected to the original machine. One by one, she turned to Croft. Double the guards on the forensic lab. Lock down anything recovered from Mercer's flat. No digital transfers. Hard copies only. Croft nodded and left. But before Helena could move, her phone rang. She frowned at the screen. It was an unlisted number. She answered, and a familiar voice crackled through the line. You're too late, Helena. It was Eliza. You're still trying to solve it like it's a crime, she said. It's not. It's a loop. You break one part, another repeats. We were only ever passengers. Eliza, where are you? You need to stop looking for the culprit. Start looking at the clock. The line went dead. Helena stared at the phone for several seconds. Then she spun to Latimer. Trace that call. Now, he ran the trace, bounced through 5 proxies. Final location Blackfriars Bridge. We're going there, Helena said, already moving. Bring the brass dog, and the journal scans. If she's right, then the timepiece isn't just metaphorical. It's dictating the rhythm of the entire operation. They arrived at the bridge within the hour. The streets were quiet, traffic minimal, but as they approached the south walkway, Helena spotted something strange. A brass disc fixed to the base of a lamppost. It hadn't been there before. She crouched beside it. The engraving was identical to the spiral in Eliza's sketch. Below it, a phrase etched in tiny, ornate script. Borrowed time cannot be repaid, only rerun. Suddenly, Latimer's phone vibrated. He looked at the screen, then went pale. A body, he said. Discovered 20 minutes ago. Warehouse district. Gunshot wound, no ID mail. They think it's Mercer. They drove without speaking. The scene was already cordoned off, forensics in place. Helena ducked under the tape. The man's face was mostly intact despite the shot through the chest. She recognized him at once. "Not Mercer," she whispered. "That's Thorne." His eyes were open, blank, mouth slightly parted. Something had been placed in his hand. A pocket watch, the same model as Crane's. Only this one was running. Helena took it gently and examined the time. It was set to 3:12 a.m., the exact moment Eliza vanished from her room. "It's a message," she murmured. "Someone is resetting the clock, moving backwards, hiding their steps in each tick." A second later her phone chimed. A single image sent from an anonymous number. It showed the desk in her own office, and on it another brass dog, one she hadn't seen before. She looked up. "Latimer, we're not chasing the killer anymore. We're being pulled toward them." He stared. "You mean they want to be found?" "No," Helena said. "They want us to find them at exactly the right time." She looked down at Thorne's lifeless form, at the ticking watch in his hand. The machine wasn't just mechanical, it was narrative, cyclical. Every clue, every body, every vanishing act, steps in a choreography none of them had fully understood. And now, the loop was closing again. The rain began to fall as they left the warehouse, a steady drizzle misting the air and making the streets shimmer under the grey morning light. Helena sat silent in the back of the car, Thorne's lifeless eyes still burned behind her eyelids, the ticking watch heavy in her pocket. She turned it over again and again, studying its perfect face. The time on its hands, 3:12 a.m., was more than a coincidence. Everything in this case pointed not to motive, nor to method, but to time. Or rather, how it was being used, manipulated, performed. Back at Scotland Yard, Latimer placed the new brass dog, discovered mysteriously on her office desk, next to the original, half-melted one. They were identical in shape, but not in texture. The new one was smooth, polished, unmarred by heat or violence. On its underside, etched in the same delicate hand as before, was a new inscription. "No mechanism ticks without intention." Helena stared at it, her mind beginning to turn at a different rhythm. She recalled Eliza's voice on the phone. "You were never meant to see the whole machine." What if the case had never been about a single crime at all? What if this was a constructed pattern, each action designed to mimic the function of a clock? A mystery performed on schedule. She opened her notebook and flipped back through every oddity, the dog figurines, the missing watch from Crane's flat, the broken gears from Mercer's study, the spiral symbol repeating in everything. She paused, then wrote in bold across the top, "What repeats?" A subtle anxiety prickled her as she scanned again through the witness statements. Eliza had mentioned her father, David Crane, being obsessed with timekeeping. Mercer's academic work focused on psychological cycles, patterns of grief, memory, trauma. Thorne had once testified in a trial about ritual behavior in criminal minds. Everything repeated. She tapped her pen against the journal scans from Mercer's flat. In one entry, he described a phenomenon he called the borrowed loop. A mental state in which individuals relive critical moments not because they forget, but because they are compelled. A self-imposed recursion. Helena stood abruptly. "We're not dealing with a killer," she said. "We're dealing with someone enacting a sequence. Someone who thinks of crime as a loop, a ritual. These aren't accidents. They're timestamps." Latimer looked up from the scans. "Then what's the next one?" "That's what I'm going to find out." She walked back to the forensics chamber, passing the hallway where Eliza had vanished. The faint scent of that strange chemical still lingered. It wasn't chloroform. It was something sharper, fainter. She turned the air filtration logs on her phone and requested data from that corridor for the past 48 hours. The system pulled up a trace's diethyl ether, old-fashioned. Rarely used now. Someone wanted her quiet, not unconscious, Helena muttered. She returned to her desk and laid out everything. 2 dog figurines, 3 pocket watches, 1 broken, 1 missing, 1 ticking. Mercer's journal. Thorne's report on repetitive criminal behavior. Eliza's note about the machine. The pattern was staring her in the face. And she'd seen it before, but not in evidence. In behavior. She opened the file on Mercer's student, the one who had gone missing years ago, Jonathan Reed. He had been Mercer's most promising mentee. Talented, quiet, brilliant with mechanical design. His disappearance had been ruled a suicide. His last known message a quote from Heraclitus. Time is a game played beautifully by children. The body had never been found. Helena pulled up the old investigation photos. Among them was a single shot of Reed's dormitory desk. The detail struck her immediately, a brass dog figurine. Identical to the one she now had in her possession. A chill passed down her spine. Latima, she called. What if the person behind all this didn't disappear? What if he just changed his name? Latimer frowned. You think Reed's alive? No. I think he became someone else. Someone inside the system. They checked employment records, aliases, pension files, academic appointments. It took an hour. But the match came eventually, hidden deep within university contracts. Jonathan Reed had reappeared 5 years later under a new identity. A technical advisor on experimental learning. His current role: consulting engineer for the Metropolitan Museum of Time and Antiquity, and listed as a visiting lecturer. David Crane. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The connections clicked into place. Eliza Mercer Thorne. Crane, they had all been part of something bigger. Something designed. Something curated. She stared at the museum's address, her heart quickening. That was where it had started. That was where it would end. But then, a memory jolted her. The drawing Eliza had left. The spiral. It wasn't just a symbol. It was a map. She pulled it up again and overlaid it on the museum's architectural diagram. The central rotunda, the clock tower, the West Exhibit Hall. The symbols matched. Perfectly. She turned the spiral clockwise, and it lined up with the museum's internal tour route. The pattern isn't random, she whispered. It's a walk-through, a sequence of acts. Someone's built the crime like a performance. Latimer looked at her. Then what's the finale? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she held up the ticking watch, Thorne's final possession. It was still marking time, 3:12. No matter how long it ticked, it never moved beyond that minute. It wasn't a watch. It was a signal. Helena leaned back, her thoughts racing. The message on the first dog borrowed time cannot be repaid, only rerun. They weren't solving a murder. They were caught in a ritual. And someone was about to reset the clock again. The wind cut sharp through the streets as Helena approached the Metropolitan Museum of Time and Antiquity, the ticking watch clenched in her fist. Her footsteps echoed through the arched stone entrance, now closed to the public but alive with silence. The weight of the spiral map pulsed in her mind, each step a marker in the pattern. Every corridor, every exhibit mimicked a function: memory, perception, recursion. She wasn't following a trail anymore. She was navigating a mind. She passed the display of historical horology, a showcase of clocks dismantled and reconstructed across centuries. Gears, pendulums, weights, all of it sterile, mechanical, yet eerily familiar. At the far end of the hall, the clock tower's spiral staircase loomed. She climbed it slowly, carefully, feeling the rhythm of each footfall match the imagined beat of that broken watch. 3:12 forever frozen in someone's memory. At the top, past the final door, the chamber opened. Dimly lit. At the center stood a table. And seated behind it, as though awaiting an appointment, was Eliza Crane. Her eyes were calm, unblinking. No fear, no confusion. A stillness that unsettled. "You came alone," she said. Helena didn't respond immediately. "You're not the one orchestrating this." "No," Eliza murmured. "I'm part of it. Like you." Helena stepped closer, her voice low. "Where is he?" Eliza looked up at the large clock mechanism above them. "He's already here. Has been for years. He doesn't need to be present to act. He's built himself into the gears." "Jonathan Reed," Helena said flatly. Eliza blinked almost sadly. "That name was buried with the first loop. You knew who he was all along." "Not until recently," Eliza said. "My father tried to warn me. He said we were all borrowed elements in someone else's design. That Mercer, Thorne, even he, were just variables in a system being refined." Helena moved to the table, laid down the broken watch. "Why 3:12? 8 was the time of death," Eliza said. "The first one. Reed's first attempt. A girl named Marianne Fletcher, his classmate. His first love." Helena stilled. "He couldn't save her," Eliza continued. "But he thought he could recreate the conditions. Rerun them. Learn. Every crime since then has been a variant of that moment. Different victims, different variables, but always circling that original point. Have built a system of murder," Helena said. "A ritual, not out of revenge." "Out of grief, no," Eliza said quietly. "Out of guilt." The words settled heavy in the air. Helena paced, the pieces aligning. "He believes he's testing for a different outcome. That if he gets the sequence right, someone, maybe Marianne, will live. That time can be corrected." Eliza nodded. "That's why he calls it borrowing. Each act is a debt he owes her, but he repays it with others' lives." "And you?" Helena asked. "Where do you fit?" Eliza exhaled. "My father tried to stop him, so did Mercer. They didn't realize they were being written into the system. Even their deaths served the pattern. Me. I was always meant to be the final observer. The one who would witness it all and decide. Decide what? If the clock should keep ticking." Helena stepped back. "You think he'll stop?" "No," Eliza said. "But you might." There was a scraping sound behind them. A panel slid open in the wall, revealing a long, narrow corridor lined with shelves of mechanical journals, blueprints and broken watch pieces. At the far end stood a man, older now. Gaunt, hair graying at the edges. But the eyes were unmistakable, precise, calculated, devout. "Detective March," said Jonathan Reed. His voice was calm. Measured. "Welcome to the end of the mechanism." Helena kept her posture still, her mind already cataloging exits, shadows, weight of her steps. "You've orchestrated all of this," she said. "I've calibrated it," he corrected. "Murder is a clumsy word. What I've done is study reaction. Behavior, entropy." "You killed Marianne Fletcher?" "No," he said. "Time did. I've merely been trying to teach it remorse." Helena stared. The madness was elegant, terrifying in its conviction. "You believe if you recreate the perfect sequence, you can undo her death?" "No," he said again. "I believe that if I perfect it, I'll understand why she died. And once I understand it, truly, perhaps I'll be allowed to forget." Silence pressed in. Eliza turned away, ashamed. "That's your motive," Helena said slowly. "Not power. Not revenge. Not even grief. You're trying to erase memory by mastering it. You've turned guilt into a system. Emotion is a loop," he said. "Grief resets. The only way to break it is to complete the cycle. By murdering people." Her voice cracked. Reed's eyes softened, disturbingly genuine. By making the world answer the question I cannot. Helena reached for the ticking watch again. You used this as a timer, a reminder. You froze it at the moment she died. And now, he said, stepping forward, I'm inviting you to stop it. I already have, Helena said, revealing the watch's back. The inscription had changed since she last checked. Etched beneath the mechanism were the words, "Time returns only what you leave behind." Reed paused. The stillness in him faltered. Helena stepped between him and Eliza. You wanted a final observer. But you forgot that observers interfere, that we're part of the outcome. He stared at her, then turned and disappeared down the corridor. Do we follow? Eliza asked. No, Helena said, slowly placing the watch on the table. We let him vanish. That's the one thing he's never rehearsed. As they descended the clock tower, the first rays of dawn cut through the clouded sky. The rain had stopped. And somewhere inside that vast, silent museum, the ticking had too. The streets of London were quiet in that strange, suspended hour just before dawn, where even the air seemed hesitant to move. Helena March stood at the edge of Fleet Docks, hands buried in her coat pockets, gaze fixed on the decrepit warehouse whose windows blinked faintly with old sodium light. She'd traced every broken line of Jonathan Reed's design, every murder, every misdirection, every name borrowed from the past. And each step had led here. Reed had vanished from the museum as she knew he would. Not in defeat, but to recalibrate. That's what he did, rebuild, retune, reprogram. She hadn't stopped him. Not yet. But she had taken something with her when she left the tower control. She moved quietly now, slipping past the rusted gate and into the shadows of the warehouse's side entrance. Inside, the air was heavy with damp iron and old oil. Wooden crates were stacked like barricades, and somewhere beyond them, the low murmur of an analog reel to real word. It was the sound of calculation, of memory being unwound and rewound. Helena didn't call out. She stepped into the open floor slowly, methodically. And there he was. Jonathan Reed stood near a table cluttered with blueprints, photographs, and a spiral-bound ledger. His back was to her, sleeves rolled to the elbow, as if conducting a final rehearsal. A metronome ticked steadily beside him, its swing deliberate. You knew I'd come? Helena said softly. Of course, he replied without turning. You're the variable I never accounted for properly. The constant that turned inconsistent. You're done, she said, stepping closer. It's over, Reed. You've run the sequence to death. Literally, and nothing changed. He turned slowly, eyes clear but tired. That's not true. You've changed, Eliza's changed. He paused. Considering his own words, I am nearing completion. Helena took another step. That's what this is about. Completion, not justice. Not redemption. It was never about redemption, he said. Redemption requires belief in punishment. I've only ever believed in patterns. She gestured at the table. Is that what tonight is? Another trial run. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he lifted a photograph, a black and white image of Marianne Fletcher, smiling in mid-laughter, caught in some forgotten spring. He looked at it a long time before lowering it. I've built this structure again and again, he murmured. Different outcomes, different actors. But you refuse to follow the pattern. You think this is your story, she said. But it isn't. It's hers. It's all the women you used to test your grief. Marianne, Eliza, Laura, even your own sister. He slammed a hand against the table. The metronome jumped and wobbled. Don't you speak her name. Helena didn't flinch. You murdered your sister, Jonathan. She found your notebooks. Didn't she? She tried to burn them. You stopped her. His voice lowered to a whisper. She was supposed to understand. And when she didn't, Helena said, her voice calm, you turned her into a control variable, just like the rest. The silence that followed was taut as wire. Reed's shoulders trembled, but not with fear, something closer to sorrow. Or rage. I didn't kill her, he said. The mechanism did. The necessity. You mean you did, Helena replied. And you've been hiding behind that excuse ever since. She drew out the object from her pocket. The broken watch, its hands forever frozen at 3Z12. She placed it on the table beside the metronome. I set the trap the moment you let me walk away from that museum. You wanted to reset the game. But this time, you left too many fingerprints. I've got your diagrams, your triggers, your record of the replicas. Reed's eyes narrowed. So you've come to arrest me? No, she said. I've come to end this. From the shadows behind the crates, a second figure emerged, Eliza Crane, pale, composed, holding a revolver, steady and ready. You trusted me, Reed said bitterly. No, Eliza replied. I trusted my father. And he trusted you. That was our mistake. Reed looked between them. Then he moved, fast, knocking over the table, sending papers and gears flying. The metronome cracked underfoot as he lunged for the far wall, where a narrow door stood half hidden. But Helena was faster. She reached for the chain overhead, yanking it hard. With a groan, a suspended crate dropped from the rafters, crashing down between Reed and the door, cutting off his escape. Reed stumbled back. You planned this, he hissed. Yes, Helena said. Because unlike you, I learn from repetition. Reed looked at Eliza. Then at the broken watch between them. Something in him buckled. A slow, haunted laugh rose in his throat. You still don't understand. This was never about escape. It was about preservation. Someone had to remember. And someone had to stop you, Helena said. Eliza stepped forward. The gun lowered now. Her voice was nearly a whisper. Why did you choose us? Me, Reed met her eyes. Because you were the most like her. You saw patterns. You didn't cry at her funeral. You asked why. The silence that followed wasn't triumphant, it was hollow. A cold echo of finality. Helena took out the small voice recorder from her coat and clicked it off. Every word recorded. The confession sealed. It's over. Jonathan. He slumped against the wall, defeated but strangely serene. Perhaps now the watch will stop ticking. Eliza stepped back. And together with Helena, she turned away. The mechanism had run its course. And the man who borrowed time had finally run out. As the first light of dawn spilled through the grimy windows of the warehouse, Helena and Eliza escorted Jonathan Reed out into the cold morning air, the subdued clatter of the arriving officers barely breaking the fragile calm. Reed, now a broken man with traces of his former brilliance still flickering in his eyes, was silent, his confession recorded and locked away. It felt as if the last shadow of the mystery had been exorcised. But as Helena stepped aside to allow the officers to handcuff Reed, a subtle detail caught her eye. A folded slip of paper barely visible in the pocket of Reed's coat, peeking out like a secret begging to be told. She didn't call out immediately, instead waiting until the prisoner was safely inside the police van, before slipping the paper from the pocket. Unfolding it carefully, she found a series of cryptic numbers and symbols, nothing resembling the earlier blueprints or diaries, but more like a cipher or a code. Her mind raced. This wasn't Reed's handwriting, it was precise, almost clinical, too neat for a man as frayed as Reed had become. Eliza, she whispered, pulling the young woman close. Look at this. Eliza's brow furrowed as she took the note, her eyes scanning the sequence. "This isn't Reed's style," she murmured. He was chaotic, obsessed with patterns but never this methodical. Helena's gaze hardened. Someone else was guiding him. Or worse, manipulating him. Their conversation was cut short by the arrival of Detective Inspector Graves, a man who had shadowed the investigation with quiet skepticism. "Find something?" he asked, nodding toward the folded paper in Helena's hand. Helena hesitated. "Something that suggests Reed wasn't acting alone. That there may be a deeper force at work." Graves raised an eyebrow. "You're saying our mastermind is still out there?" Helena nodded grimly. "Exactly." They retreated to a nearby cafe, the steaming cups of coffee doing little to warm the chill settling in their bones. Helena spread out the notes and Reed's earlier notebooks between them, the codes intertwining like threads of a dark tapestry. Hours passed, and patterns began to emerge from the chaos. The cipher matched a code Helena had seen in an obscure archive, a signature used by an elusive figure known only as the Curator, a shadowy puppeteer rumored to orchestrate crimes from behind the scenes. The Curator was a myth to most, a ghost in the criminal underworld, but Helena's instincts screamed that this was no coincidence. Eliza's voice broke the silence. If the Curator's involved, then Reed was just a pawn. The murders, the timing, it all fits a bigger game. Helena's mind turned over the pieces of the puzzle anew. The intricate design of the crimes, the subtle manipulation of suspects, the vanishing evidence. It all had the meticulous touch of someone used to controlling complex operations. Someone with access, influence, and cold patience. Suddenly, her phone buzzed. A message from an anonymous source. "You're close, but not close enough. The truth lies in plain sight." Her heart skipped a beat. She glanced at Eliza, whose eyes mirrored her own determination. Back at the station, Helena requested to review the statements of the people closest to Reed again. Family members, colleagues, anyone with a vested interest. One name kept recurring with peculiar insistence: Victoria Langley, Reed's former research partner, and the last person to see him before his disappearance at the museum. Victoria had remained silent throughout the investigation, her demeanor unreadable. When confronted, she claimed ignorance, an innocent bystander caught in an unfortunate web. Helena arranged a meeting, noting the faint scent of lavender as Victoria entered the room. A delicate perfume that somehow seemed out of place with the steely resolve in her eyes. "Ms. Langley," Helena began, "your cooperation could be vital in uncovering the full story." Victoria smiled thinly. "I have nothing to add." Jonathan's demons were his own. But the code? Helena pressed, sliding the folded paper across the table. "It bears your handwriting." Victoria's smile faltered. "You're mistaken." Helena watched as the faintest flicker of panic crossed Victoria's face, quickly masked by practiced composure. "Why did Reed hide this from everyone?" Helena asked softly. "And why did you keep silent?" Victoria's voice dropped, almost a whisper. "Because sometimes the price of truth is too high to pay." A sudden sharp knock interrupted them. The door creaked open and a uniformed officer entered with a hastily scribbled note, his expression grave. Helena unfolded the message. It was brief but chilling: "Trust no one. The clock is still ticking." Victoria's eyes darted to the door, then back to Helena. Her calm facade shattered for the first time. Helena realized the final confrontation was far from over. The mastermind was not only still free, but closer than she had ever feared. Every alley could be a traitor, every word a trap. As the cafe emptied around them, Helena and Eliza shared a determined glance. The shadows they had chased were deeper than anyone knew, and to catch the true architect of the crimes, Helena would have to step beyond logic into the very heart of deception itself. The game had changed. The last move was yet to be played. Helena stood in the dimly lit room, the weight of the past weeks pressing heavily upon her shoulders. Around her, the scattered pieces of the investigation, the coded notes, Reed's journals, Victoria's guarded confession, formed a tapestry as intricate as it was chilling. The truth was finally within reach, yet somehow more elusive than ever. Victoria Langley's sudden shift in demeanor had cracked the case wide open. The faintest hint of fear in her eyes revealed more than any confession could. It was clear she was tangled in the web of deceit, but the question remained: was she the mastermind or merely another pawn? Determined to press forward, Helena summoned Victoria one last time. The room was cold, the silence punctuated only by the ticking of an old clock, a cruel reminder of the borrowed time that had run out for the victims, and perhaps for Victoria herself. Ms. Langley. Helena began, her voice steady yet sharp. The evidence against you is overwhelming. The code found in Reed's pocket, the connections to the curator, the financial records hidden in your office, all point to your involvement. Victoria's gaze was steady, almost defiant. You think I orchestrated this? That I manipulated Jonathan? You have no proof. Helena smiled faintly, producing a small, worn envelope. Not proof, but a confession. From inside the envelope, she withdrew a recording device. Pressing play, Victoria's own voice filled the room, recounting a conversation with Reed. Her words cold, calculating, hinting at plans to silence him should he falter. Victoria's mask slipped momentarily, her lips trembling. I only wanted to protect what we built. Jonathan went too far, threatened everything. And so you took justice into your own hands, Helena said quietly. But the law must prevail. Before Victoria could respond, the door burst open. Police officers moved swiftly, handcuffs clicking around her wrists. As she was led away, Helena felt a bitter satisfaction mixed with unease. The crime was solved, justice served, yet shadows lingered. Later, as Helena pieced together the timeline, she reflected on the subtle clues everyone had missed. The carefully placed chess pieces, the odd meeting times, the hidden correspondence, the inconsistent alibis. All had whispered the truth to those willing to listen. Reed's confession had been a diversion, a smokescreen orchestrated by Victoria to buy time. The missing ledger, the altered surveillance tapes, the vanishing evidence. It was all part of a meticulous plan to keep her secrets safe. Helena's mind wandered to the message from the anonymous source. Trust no one. The clock is still ticking. Had she truly caught the whole truth? Or was there another layer, another player still lurking in the shadows? As the sun set beyond the city skyline, Helena stood alone, the case files spread before her like a map of human folly. Justice had been served, or had it merely escaped into the night, waiting to strike again? The detective's eyes narrowed with resolve. In this world of borrowed time, the final move never belonged to the villain. It belonged to her. Helena stepped out into the cool night air, the city lights casting long shadows on the pavement beneath her feet. The arrest of Victoria Langley had seemed to close the case. Yet as she moved away from the precinct, a subtle disquiet gnawed at her. A whisper of doubt that refused to be silenced. The streets hummed with the usual bustle, but Helena's mind replayed every detail of the investigation. There was something about the final confrontation that hadn't settled completely. The carefully constructed confession, the hurried compliance of Victoria's arrest, and that fleeting glance. A flicker of something unspoken lingered in her memory like a half-remembered dream. Her thoughts returned to the small, cryptic note she had found tucked inside one of Reed's old books. Time borrowed is time owed. The phrase had seemed at first a poetic flourish, but now it felt more like a warning, a message left deliberately for those who dared to dig deeper. As she walked past a dimly lit cafe, a sudden movement caught her eye, a shadow slipping silently into an alleyway. Instinctively, Helena paused, senses alert. But the figure was gone before she could react, leaving behind only a faint scent of jasmine and something metallic in the air. She reached into her coat pocket and fingered the photograph she had taken during the investigation. An image of the locked room's window, slightly ajar despite earlier reports. No one had noticed it then, brushed off as a careless oversight, but now it beckoned her with silent insistence. Was the case truly closed? Had the real architect of this tragedy slipped through their grasp? The thought was unsettling, yet familiar. A reminder that in this line of work, endings were often illusions, and mysteries never truly ceased. Helena's phone buzzed quietly. She glanced at the screen, a message from an unknown number. It read simply, "The clock resets at midnight. Be ready." A chill ran down her spine, but instead of fear, a spark of determination ignited. This was not a threat, it was a challenge. The game was far from over. She tucked the phone away, her eyes scanning the night sky where stars shimmered faintly through the city's haze. Somewhere in that darkness, answers awaited, perhaps even new questions. As she disappeared into the shadows, the borrowed time still ticking, Helena knew one thing for certain. Every mystery left behind a trail, and she would follow it wherever it led. Because for a detective like her, the story never truly ends. It only begins anew.